Hi students, so this activity or lab is going to have to be doing with the atmosphere, and we're going to be looking at how different changes can cause different things to happen with our ozone layer and our atmosphere. So once you've downloaded the lab report or you've used the one that your teacher provided you, maybe it's a Google Doc or some other type of form, you're going to need to stay on this page and click through in order to get to all of the information. So it's going to be important that you understand the objective because on the lab report, you're going to have to write your own. So make sure that you read this objective and you try to put it in your own words and you make it clear. Next, you're going to come up with a hypothesis. So this is great here because you are able to use the drop-down menu in order to test your hypothesis. So we want to know if carbon dioxide emissions are going to increase, decrease, or stay the same in the next century, and global temperatures will increase, decrease, or stay the same. So once you fill in these different types of variables, you are then going to make sure that this exact one is in your hypothesis in your lab report. So you may have to rework it a little bit in order to make it into an if-then statement. So all you do to do that is go, if carbon dioxide emissions increase in the next century, then global temperatures will increase. So you're able to work it into a hypothesis very easily. In your lab report, you're also going to have to make sure that you have your independent and your dependent variables. So our independent variable is the thing that I change as the scientist. So here we are going to be changing the amount of carbon dioxide emissions in our experiment here in a second. And the thing that we are measuring, or our dependent variable, is going to be the global temperatures. So make sure that you have those variables in your lesson. So this is going to be the chart that we use. And in order to go on to the next slide, you'll see it won't let me. And that's because I haven't looked at all of the features. So this is going to be the slider, which will change the amount of carbon emissions. These are going to be the data, and we can either look at 5 or 10-year increments. Our directions only have us looking at 10-year increments. So step forward just means that we're going to move forward 10 years. And finally, this is going to be the start over button in case we messed up. So you'll notice because I clicked those 4, now next is going to show up as working. So we're going to run 3 different scenarios, and we're going to be recording our data for all 3 of these scenarios in order to see what global temperatures will do. So first is the carbon dioxide emissions, we're going to stay exactly the same. In the second one, we are going to decrease the global emissions, and in the very last one, we're going to increase the carbon emissions. So here, we want to make sure that our carbon dioxide is set to 9.8, and we want to set the time to 10 years, and then we're going to step forward until the year 2110. So that means I have to switch to this and then step forward all the way until we finished it. So here you guys are going to notice that even though the amount of carbon dioxide that we're releasing doesn't change until the year 2110, we're still going to see a rise in the global temperature, and that's because of the greenhouse effects. So all of this CO2 or the carbon dioxide that we're releasing, it's still getting trapped within our atmosphere and it's still overheating the atmosphere. So let's take a look at scenario number 2. So here, again, we're going to start at 9.8 and go to 10 years, and we're going to only go forward 1 time. So after we go forward once, we're going to start decreasing the carbon emissions by 0.2, and that's just going to be one click. And we're going to continue stepping forward until we reach the end year. So let's try this. So we stepped forward once, and we're decreasing. Okay, and we have now run out of steps. So here you're going to notice that we are decreasing the amount of carbon emissions, but even though the global temperature is still rising, it's not rising at the same rate as last time. So this seems to be like a way to help us get that global warming under control. So in our last scenario, we are going to start with our 9.8 and move forward 10 years. But instead of decreasing, we are now going to increase each time. So let's see what happens here. All right, so you guys can see that I messed up there, but we can still get a good sense of the data. I messed up on the very last one. It didn't go up one. So here we notice that the temperature is rising much more rapidly with the amount of carbon dioxide that we are releasing. So hopefully this can show us that carbon dioxide really has a negative effect on global warming due to the greenhouse effect. So now we are going to try to draw some conclusions. So in order to draw some conclusions, we're going to go over to the actual lab report. So we talked about this already, but it's going to be important that you have your objective, your hypothesis, your independent and your dependent variables before you start. Here are going to be the data charts where you're going to be able to write in the amount of carbon emissions and the temperature for each of your steps. You're going to do that for scenario 1, scenario 2, and even scenario 3. So when you get to your conclusion, you're going to have to summarize each of the 3 scenarios. So in a few sentences, hopefully complete sentences, you're going to summarize 1, 2, and 3 and just tell me what happened. Was your hypothesis supported by the results or not? And explain how you know this. So there's 2 parts to this question. So if you explain the difference between the greenhouse effect and global warming, this may be a time when you want to go back into the lesson and reread the definitions of these 2 and use that instead of just trying to do it from memory. Based on your knowledge of how the greenhouse effect works, why does the level of carbon dioxide affect the global temperature? And we know that the greenhouse effect is going to keep things within the atmosphere, so it's going to be able to recycle things like energy and also this harmful carbon dioxide back through the atmosphere. So that's going to be a reason that global temperatures are rising. And finally, when you have to name 3 sources of atmospheric carbon dioxide, what you're going to do is go back into the lesson and look on the 5th slide, and there is going to be a graphic at the bottom that's going to tell you where all of the carbon dioxide is. So make sure that you guys are using the lesson for the conclusion in order to be successful. So let's take a look at the grading rubric. So in order to get full points, it's going to be important that you listed your objective clearly. So if you're not very clear, you're going to lose a point. If your hypothesis is not formatted in the if-then statement, then you are going to lose some points. So make sure you're adding if before carbon dioxide and you're changing the and to then. For the procedure, you're going to have to make sure that your variables were identified accurately. So if they're not identified accurately, you're going to lose a point. Next, we're going to look at the data. So this portion is where you're looking at the graphs. So making sure that you are filling out the graphs completely and that everything is going to be as accurate as possible. I know that those numbers are small, so do your best. Maybe try to blow it up, but just make sure that you're as close and as accurate as possible. And finally, you're going to do the conclusion. So the conclusion is going to be tricky this time. So you're going to need to make sure that you have excellent critical thinking and problem solving skills, and that your answers and ideas were expanded with unique details and that were novel, which means new, and showed creative thinking. So here, if you're not adding in extra detail and if you're just doing kind of like the baseline work, that's going to mean that you're going to probably get in the 11 to 8 point range. So make sure that you're fully explaining yourself in order to get the full amount of credit. So that is what you're going to be doing this week. So good luck before the module exam.